Welcome to the James Rice Show, a humorous, entertaining, and sometimes thought-provoking look at teaching and studying abroad. Join the conversation as James guides you through his experiences and provides insights into how to improve your English and how to improve your teaching of English. And now, here's the man you've been waiting for, James Rice.
Coming up on this week's episode, an EdTech chat with Dr. Monica Burns, founder of Class Tech Tips and an Apple Distinguished Educator, all coming up on the James Rice Show. Hello, my students and fellow educators. Welcome to this week's episode of the James Rice Show. I am James, and I am broadcasting from Toronto, Canada, with our lovely producer Stephanie joining here, and I'm very, very happy to welcome to the show Dr. Monica Burns, who is a fantastic EdTech consultant now. She has been a teacher, but now she goes around the country and consults and gives lectures and helps schools transform into using an EdTech curriculum. And I'm very pleased to I've been following her for many, many years, and her blog, Class Tech Tips, it's wonderful. She also has a podcast out there called Easy EdTech, so you can find some of those links in the descriptions. As many of you know, I am an iBooks fan. I use iBooks Author a lot. I have created the Study It ESL textbooks, which are the first ever 100% digital and interactive textbooks. I shouldn't say I created it myself, because we had a team of people working on it, but it was an amazing process that we went through to create those digital textbooks, and they're available through the iBook store on Apple, and you can download them or visit our website, www.studyitbooks.com, where you can also find other other iBooks that are available in math and physics and music and many other subjects. And I think they're the way of the future as far as how we're going to be teaching kids and adults in any subject, because they are so amazing, so interactive. And I'm also right now kind of fooling around with Moodle. So I don't know if any of you have used Moodle before, but I've been playing in that playground a little bit, creating some online courses. And Moodle is good. It's got a lot of tools, a lot of amazing tools, not as intuitive as the iBooks, and you do have to go online, so you need a Wi-Fi connection, whereas with iBooks you download them and you have them in your device. So I would prefer using iBooks, but Moodle, of course, allows everybody everywhere to access those tools, and of course that's quite popular for schools and businesses who are designing some of those online courses. So I have been an EdTech guy for many years now. Since probably about 2012, I've been a big supporter of EdTech. You can catch some of my previous podcasts where we talk about virtual reality. We talk about how to flip classes using different EdTech tools. I've reviewed some different apps. So if you go through some of the past podcasts, you can see this. And I'm a strong believer that teachers must have EdTech tools in your toolbox. It is an absolute necessity, and I hear too many times all over America and all over the world, France doing this, banning mobile devices from the classroom. And I'm just so against it. It is absolutely wrong, because, frankly, that's where students live. And I ask you, how many teachers in your life do you remember? I mean, we've probably had 100 teachers in our lives, from elementary school to junior high school to high school to college, university. We probably had 100 teachers. How many do you actually remember as being passionate, caring, and somebody who really got you as a teacher? How many? 4, maybe 5? And I hear many teachers say, kids don't want to learn, or kids are distracted. or kids are different from today. But I never hear a teacher say, I suck as a teacher. I hear more that the kids are the problems, okay, because of the mobile devices. So I ask you, how many of you have a mobile device? How many of you have them? All of you have them. And how many of you play games and use the various apps that the kids are using? Do you play Clash of Clans? Do you play Clash Royale? Do you use WhatsApp? Do you use WeChat? Do you use Snapchat? Are you using these tools that the kids are using? Who are the celebrities that they're following? Are you following the Marvel group that's out there? Even though you may not enjoy watching those Marvel movies, many of your students are Marvel fans. And these are the forces that are operating on the students. All of these apps, all of these games, all of these celebrities, all of these movies and Netflix shows, these are operating on your students. And if you want to be one of those top 5 teachers in their lives, then you got to understand what is going on in their heads. You got to know what's going on in their minds. And you got to know how to communicate with them and how they are communicating with each other. Because it is in there that you will access their minds. And that gives you the power to communicate with them. That gives you the power to be one of those top 5 teachers. Now, for me, a class with no EdTech in it is uninspiring. It is boring. And you will be one of the 95 teachers that your students will forget. And I know it is hard. What I also hear is that it's too difficult. I know it is hard to learn these tools. And yes, I've been learning a lot of them since 2012. But you as a teacher, you need to rise to that challenge, okay? All right? You need to be there and rise to the challenge. Not because it's easy, but because it is hard, as President Kennedy said since we had the moon landing last month. You have to rise up to meet that challenge as a teacher and learn these EdTech tools so that you can be one of their top 5 memorable teachers. All right. So let's bring in Stephanie. Let's bring in Monica Burns and let's hear her perspective because she's going to talk about some of the great tools that you can use for your classroom. Monica Burns, Dr. Monica Burns, coming up next.
The Study It textbooks are the first ever completely digital and interactive English as a second language textbook series. Once downloaded, these textbooks do not require a Wi-Fi connection. Students and teachers can use them anywhere, anytime. Used in over 40 schools, universities, and NGOs worldwide. Study It is the future of English teaching. Visit www.studyitbooks.com for more information.
Welcome back to the show. I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Monica Burns, host of the podcast Easy EdTech and the blog ClassTechTips.com. Welcome, Monica.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Now, Monica, what is your hottest EdTech tip for ESL teachers and students out there?
Well, one thing that I've been sharing widely this past year is virtual reality without a headset. So using digital resources that are online primarily browser-based, to help connect students to panoramic images, 360 images, 360 video, and for ESL students, building background knowledge, giving context for vocabulary and conversations around different places and spaces is so important. So that's one area that I'm really excited about across the board, but particularly for the student population.
And I think that's on YouTube is doing that, is it not?
Yeah, so you can definitely access some content on YouTube. So National Geographic has a great playlist of 360 videos hosted on YouTube. NASA, BBC, and their Planet Earth series has some content on YouTube. So it's very accessible for teachers and students.
Now, how difficult is it for teachers to come up with ideas for using virtual reality in the classroom? What are the teachers telling you?
So one thing that I often will have in a conversation with an educator is where are some areas where you know that students have had different types of life experiences where they might not quite understand what you're getting at when you introduce a new vocabulary word, or you know that they are new to an area or a space, or they have not traveled very far out of the area or space that you are in, and identifying those places that can help bring something to life, provide some context for students, it can be very useful. So in the past, we might search for an image or pull that up on a screen in a classroom. Now we can give students a little bit more agency to move back and forth, to watch, listen, explore a space that we may want to reference in a classroom discussion.
It's interesting that you bring up vocabulary because when I was teaching, my first experience of EdTech in the classroom came from a student where I was explaining the word blouse. And the word blouse, it's hard to explain to students. So I was up at the front trying to draw a blouse, and I turned around and I saw all of the students using their phones and looking up the word blouse and showing the picture of a blouse to the student who didn't understand the word. And that was my first realization that, you know what, we got to change the way we teach.
Absolutely, right? What an amazing problem-solving opportunity for that group of students to know where to go to find an answer to their question. So, it's also really about helping students identify those moments when they can go out and they can solve a problem independently.
Yeah. And, that was back when iPhones and the phones and the mobile phones were just starting out in the classroom. So it wasn't like last year, it was about 10 years ago. So it was still a bit of a shock back then to see how fast they could access the information. And I think, what has changed my style of teaching is the amount of content that I can give them through using all of the different tools. They're much faster. Have you experienced that?
Well, it's really wild to see just how much easier it is to organize information, right? To have it in a space that students can navigate, they can find what they're looking for. And I don't mean the information that they can Google as much as the information that an educator would curate for them. So
Right.
being able to find different pieces, right, that video clip, this article, add a discussion prompt, add a space for a response from students, right, all within a LMS, or maybe it's Google Classroom or Schoology or some space where kids are organizing all of their content. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're so fast. It's really incredible. Now, what are your favorite EdTech tools?
Well, I am a big fan of the Adobe Spark tools. I've done some work with them, and I have a book that came out last year on ways to infuse creativity into the classroom with the Spark tool. So that's one I'm really excited about. And actually, just last week, I had the chance to facilitate programming for a design camp in New York City with some students who were there for the week. And we had the younger students, the 6 to 8 year olds, creating posters to tell stories using the Spark tools. And then we had the older students using the movie making tool Spark Video to create a movie. So it's been really fun to see all of the use cases and applications for an open-ended creation tool like Spark. So that's one that I'm really excited about. And I always love tools that are evolving, right? Or have updates or listening to people. That's one that I really love.
Yeah, I'm also a huge fan of Spark. Now, what is the name of the book?
It's called 40 Ways to Inject Creativity into the Classroom with Adobe Spark. So I wrote it with Ben Forda, who's at Adobe. And so it includes a K-12 lesson ideas, teacher activities, student activities, graphic organizers. The great thing about the tool is that it doesn't have just one way to use it, right? There's no points to earn or levels to win or right way to do something, which I think for some educators, right, can be a little intimidating at first with the where do I start, right? So this, gives you that where do you start, but then lots of prompts and ideas for customizing that learning experience for students.
And do you have any section in there for vocabulary?
So there's some vocabulary activities, some poetry activities that can help also with vocabulary, vocab related specifically to the math classroom. So that's one area of focus as well that we have in the book. So it's been really great to think about the cross-curricular connections. There's an audio component, so students can record their voice along with the slides that they create. They don't have to, but they can, which makes it wonderful for students who might be building their confidence when it comes to more traditional writing skills. If they're conversationally proficient in a language, they can show what they know, demonstrate their understanding, and be really proud of what they've created in a way that they might not have the same level of confidence when it comes to writing sentences about something. And this doesn't have to be a replacement for that, but can be a support right on the way to get there.
And one of the things that I've noticed for ESL students is sometimes they don't know the vocabulary, simple things such as download, password, app store, or even they call it APP in some countries as opposed to an app. So there's a lot of teaching around the language that we use in North America versus what they use in their countries, which is quite interesting.
That's definitely interesting, right? When you think about preparing students for these experiences or making assumptions about what it is that they already know about digital spaces, right? They may know intuitively that that's a button to press, but they might not know why or what the label is on that. And so having those conversations help them navigate one tool, right, can really transfer into the work that they might do in another space as well.
Exactly. Okay, so what else? What other great tools have you got for the ESL teacher?
So I'm also a fan of Nearpod. Nearpod has an interactive presentation tool that has some of the built-in virtual reality components that I mentioned earlier I'm excited about. They also have some ways to differentiate instruction in the sense of how you might collect feedback from students. So there's an illustration option, a polling option, a short response option. So Nearpod I came across as a classroom teacher, and so I use it a lot in trainings now still, and I spend time in other people's classrooms, even though I'm out of the classroom now, demoing. And Nearpod's one of my favorite with students really of all ages. I've used it with adult learners, but I've also used it with pre-K students. So essentially every student has a device or they're sharing a device. With the younger students, it's usually one where, I'm always like having an iPad for two kiddos is totally fine for this sort of activity. So in those cases, I am leading a Nearpod lesson from my device, whether it's a smartphone or a Chromebook or a MacBook. And then I am pushing it out to students. So they have a code that they put on in their machine, whatever device they're using. It doesn't even have to be the same as mine or the same as their peers. And then I'm able to share slides with them, embed formative assessment. So it's really a nice way to get information right in front of students, whether it's a picture, primary source document you want them to talk about, or whether you are looking to support some vocabulary acquisition through sharing a quick video clip on their screen. You can check for understanding by embedding different questions within this as well. So it ends up being really nice for customizing it too.
Now, is Nearpod a web-based system?
So it's web-based, so you do need to be connected to some sort of network. They have a mobile app, and if you're using it on mobile devices all the time, I would absolutely download the app. It's just going to be a more seamless user experience. And so if you don't have the app to download, you can just go onto a web browser, which is one of the reasons I've loved it is because if I'm going someplace and I'm leading professional development for teachers and I don't know what anyone's going to bring with them because they might be coming from their school site or coming to a conference session, it'll work on their phone, it'll work on their laptop, on their Chromebook. And typically the classrooms I work with, students might have the same device, but it's also great for BYOD environments too, where someone might bring their own device.
And is there a cost, or is it free, or do they have a free?
They have a free plan, and then they have a paid plan. So because I've done some training and some work with them, they've given me access to the full plan. So typically when I'll show off to teachers, I can get more than 40 people in, right? That's what I care about, is getting people into it so that they can see it. In the classroom, I think if you try out the free plan, you're going to be really happy with it, and you may reach a point where you want more, right? That's where that freemium model comes into play with so many of these tools, but you might just be fine with the free version, especially if you are taking presentations or content that is your own and then customizing it with the Nearpod tool.
Now, you mentioned something that you said it was okay for students to share devices. One of the pushbacks that I've heard from teachers is that not all the students have a device, or not all the students have an iPad, or they don't all have a laptop. I'm at the mind they should be sharing. Sharing is okay. How do you feel about that? Yeah,
so I have a chapter in my book, Tasks Before Apps, which is my book with ASCD on tech-rich learning activities. I have a chapter all about collaboration, and in the book, I talk about some different collaborative models. So yes, you might be one-to-one, and you might participate in remote collaboration, which is simply, I'm on a Google Doc, you're in a Google Doc, doesn't matter where we are, we're all working on this together, right? Or you might have students participate in a shared screen collaborative experience where they really are leaning over, they're talking, they're pointing, they're compromising, they're evaluating the idea that someone has given them in their group. They're really having some high-level conversations. So I think there's a lot of benefit to having students share a device when there's some thoughtful preparation for what student conversations can look like and how you're going to leverage that time. So whether you are committed to a certain set of social emotional learning skills as part of a secondary curriculum, right, you might say, I want students to actually put these into practice as we're exploring content on our devices, or applying what we've learned in a different subject area. And it's a great way to have students develop transferable skills that go beyond, what button to press while still being in an online space that might mirror something that will evolve or change as technology evolves and changes as they move through, their time in the classroom as well.
Now, do you find that teachers are overusing certain tools like Kahoot? And how can they maybe get out of that rut? Because I've heard a lot of teachers saying, well, I use Kahoot and I use it a lot. And I think maybe the students are getting a little bored of some of those apps that are being promoted to teachers as EdTech tools.
Yeah, you don't want to be doing the same thing every day, just like, it's great if you're eating your vegetables, but if you're only eating broccoli, right, every day, you're probably not getting the same nutritional value as if you're eating a diverse amount of vegetables, right? So it's not to say that necessarily goes exactly what we're talking about here, but it's one of those things when I think about, moderation or too much of a good thing, right? So I think there's great use cases for something like Kahoot, and if you're using it with some sort of consistency or regular basis with your students, that's fantastic. But if you're doing it simply to have kids quiz on vocabulary every day, no matter what tool that you're using, do you really want them quizzing on vocabulary for the last 10 minutes of your class every day, right? So, that's really where I come back to when it's, what is the strategy that we're looking at here, right? Is there multiple ways to give students access to this, right? And that might involve a few different EdTech tools, right? Or are we just using it because I know where the buttons are, right? So I feel comfortable using it, right? We don't want too many tools in our tool belt, but having a handful of them, each with a different purpose or maybe a couple overlapping purposes, is worth considering.
For the new teacher starting out, what would be those handful of tools that you would recommend? Kahoot and Adobe Spark are my two go-to tools for all new teachers. I tell them that you need to have those two in your toolbox. Any other?
Yeah. I think those are two great recommendations. I really love Google Forms as a way for teachers to streamline the way they're collecting information, whether they use a Google form and input and collect information or they share that with students. I think Google Forms are really useful. Flipgrid is another favorite. However, I think it's important for educators to consider that not every student is comfortable, right, taking a selfie style video and sharing either with their teacher or with a wider audience. So building in some backup for what that can look like or some strategies around that, I think is important as well. And doing that with a shared screen where kids are sharing their device and sharing that webcam and talking at the same time as the person next to them might be a nice way to consider that as well. And then I'm also really excited about some of the multimedia content that's available from, a variety of content providers. One that I love for students who are upper elementary and older are TED Ed. They're explainer videos from the folks at TED, like TED Talks. And so those are ones I really love. If teachers are looking for video content that's high quality for younger students, I really love Storyline Online as a read aloud resource. And so not so much to say that those are plug and play, right, for children, as much as having that in your back pocket to know, here's a short video that could really support, fill in the blank, or here's a video that I can recommend to families that they can extend what we talked about in the classroom. So knowing some different places to go that connect to your particular content area for video content is always useful.
Yeah, one of the tips that I have for teachers out there who may be listening is in terms of asking students to shoot selfie videos or any videos is I offer them and suggest to them they have a choice. They can shoot a video or do it in an audio format like a podcast. So that gives them two choices if they're a bit self-conscious about being on the screen.
Yeah, and that's such a great thing to think about when we're differentiating what those activities might look like for students. So I love Soundtrap. Soundtrap's a great tool. I know some folks on their team, and it's been really exciting to see how that tool has evolved. You might use GarageBand with students or even just a simple audio recording tool where you can export as an MP3. Synthesizer is another that I've been excited about too. I connected with their team when they were first kind of rolling that out, and it's been exciting to hear more people talk about it. So yeah, there's a lot out there from an audio standpoint, and it's a medium that students are familiar with, right? Whether they listen to podcasts, they've heard of a podcast, they've heard someone mention one or talk about one, and they can wrap their head around that as a medium as well.
Yeah, that is fascinating about the podcast because they've heard of it, but they've never listened to one. It's really strange.
Right. And so, I think because sometimes a podcast does involve a little bit more of a commitment when it comes to listening, right? Whether you have a podcast that's 15 minutes long, right, or an hour long or longer, right? So there's a little bit of a commitment there, I think, that is different than watching a YouTube video or, a quick video on a social media platform where, students today may be more comfortable at first, right, with a short bit of information, right? I think it's a great medium to help them extend when we're talking about speaking and listening skills, right? So that kind of comprehension is one where, bringing in podcasts is another thing to consider as well.
Now, I've been following your blog, Class Tech Tips, for a very long time. And I want to ask you, what made you change to become an EdTech pioneer? Because, you're one of the early adapters that I started to follow way back when.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. So I actually was a classroom teacher in a pretty traditional classroom with an overhead projector and chalk and a chalkboard and all of that. And then my last 2 years in the classroom, we went one-to-one with iPads. And that really changed my perspective on what was possible, right? Beyond trying to hook up a smartboard that I found in a closet down the hallway that no one was using, right? Or any of those sort of pieces, right? Or Googling to solve problems, right? So once we had the devices to go in the hands of every student, it really transformed the way I started thinking about things. And my blog started because I was asked to speak at an event, and I kind of got off this big stage without really any experience from a public speaking or sharing perspective. And a few people started asking, like, what's your Twitter handle? What's your blog? Where do you post all this stuff? and I didn't have an answer for them. And so a couple months went by, and I decided that I would start sharing on my blog. And it was more, I found this app, I think it's exciting for this reason, or here's an activity that I tried out today, it went really well. If you want to try it, here's a picture of what it looked like. And then that really evolved into me looking at some different opportunities, deciding to leave the classroom for what I thought might just be a little bit, but has now been about 4 years or so, almost 5 years. And so then I started using that space more strategically to share things that I came across, started speaking and visiting schools, classrooms with students, and then larger events and more, where people come from a region or from, the whole country to learn and share. And that also transferred into some of the writing that I've been doing, whether it's publishing right outside of the blog or now into the podcast space. So it's been a very exciting few years. This past month, I launched a membership site called the Easy EdTech Club that goes along with some of these big ideas, really trying to narrow the focus on one big topic every month. So that's been really fun to have a few hundred folks sign up for this first round of it. So that's really been, all part of a journey that's still evolving, right? As I'm introducing new things or getting excited about new things or meeting new people.
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. That sounds wonderful. And congratulations on all of your work. If somebody is interested in having you at your school, how could they get in touch with you? Or are you presenting somewhere in the coming days?
So my full event calendar is at classtechtips.com/events, but my email is monica@classtechtips.com, and on social I'm at classtechtips. So I'm usually pretty good about answering anything that comes through my Instagram DMs or my Twitter messages or LinkedIn, right, as well. So always happy to connect with folks there. In August, I am speaking at events in New Jersey and Texas and Virginia, and then doing some work with students in New York. And then as we move through the fall, I'll be in a handful of different states, both at technology conferences, literacy conferences, as kind of the tech person on site for that, really through the end of the calendar year. So kind of all over the place, but everything is there at that events calendar at classtechtips.com/events.
All right. And so tell us about your podcast, because it is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. So we've got about 24 episodes now. I started in March of this year with the Easy EdTech podcast, and the episodes are designed to be, under 20 minutes. So pretty short and sweet, very instructional. So I have kind of a intro with a idea and then some resources or strategies that go along with that. And then I finish off the podcast with some quick tips for making it happen. So trying to make it easy, whatever that big idea is, so that everyone has a starting place. And my blog, classtechtips.com/podcast, has posts for each episode. You can stream them there. It has a transcript and resources for each episode. But the podcast is also on iTunes and Spotify and Luminary and Stitcher and all of those places.
And it is fantastic, and I highly recommend it to teachers out there who are looking for some EdTech ideas and which tools to use, because it is wonderful. Thank you so much, Monica, for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Have you subscribed to James's newsletter? When you subscribe, you will receive a free Study It ESL textbook. Visit www.thejamesriceshow.com for more information and join today.
All right, welcome back to the James Rice Show, and thank you guys for subscribing to the James Rice Show. I've had a number of subscribers over the last couple of weeks turn on and subscribe to our show, which is fantastic, and I have sent out to you the free Study It ESL textbook. So please subscribe. Happy to send you a free textbook for you to download and try it out and see what we're talking about when we talk about interactive digital textbooks, and see if you can use them, even as a resource. Even if your students are not using iPads or not using the devices, I encourage you to grab a Study It book and use it for all of the amazing resources, all of the amazing videos, all of the amazing content ideas that we have in those Study It books. You can throw them up onto a screen and show it to the students and use the various ideas that we have had to use and develop. They've all been tried, tested, and they're wonderful to use. And there's hundreds of questions in there. There's hundreds of activities and lesson ideas, all unique and different. So also, regarding Monica Burns, I really encourage ESL teachers to use the Adobe Spark app. And there's a web-based component and there's an app that you can use, so both are available. And for me, if you're at all a bit nervous about EdTech, Adobe Spark and Kahoot, Adobe Spark is probably one of the easiest tools to use and bring into your classroom, and it's totally engaging for the students. So I strongly recommend you to grab Adobe Spark. And Monica, as she mentioned in the interview, has a book about ideas and ways to use Adobe Spark, and the description is in the link, rather, to the book is in our description down below this podcast. So I really recommend that you grab that book and download Adobe Spark. It's just amazing to see the creativity bubble up from the students. And one of my big strategies with EdTech is allowing playtime. And that's really important when you're bringing in any new EdTech tool, is to give students time to play. And depending on how much class time you have and how your lessons are structured, if you're doing a semester base where you have your students for a whole semester, giving them 1 or 2 hours to play with a couple of apps and develop and create and just do things with those apps, you'll see the engagement level go way up, and the presentations and the creativity around those presentations go way up, and it will inspire you. And what they do with the tools, it's unbelievable. It's incredible. And watching them use Adobe Spark, I was then so inspired by their work that I wanted to add more to my class. So we got a green screen, and then it developed from there to increase more and more creativity by the students through using the green screen. And the green screen app that I use is DoInk, DoINK. And it's a little pricey. I think it might be like $10, but it is well worth the price, because for me, it is absolutely the best and easiest app to use for a green screen. So I recommend that app as well. So Stephanie is telling us we got to check out our top 10 listeners for the week. Yeah, all right. Our number 1 this week is back to Brazil. So thank you, my Brazilian friends. Obrigada. And number 2 is USA. Number 3, Mexico. Well, you got guys jumping back up in the top 5. Number 4, Japan. Number 5, Panama. Number 6 is Canada, dropping out of the top 5 there. I guess my family's no longer listening. Number 7 is Israel. Number 8 is Vietnam. Number 9 is Hungary. And number 10, Italy. Oh, so Italy is coming in at number 10. So it's great that we have students and we have teachers listening to us. This was heavily focused on teachers this week, so I apologize to students who are looking for more free lessons and things like that. But check through. We've got some great Idiom of the Week lessons that we ran the last couple of weeks, so you guys can check in on those. And for teachers, go back through the podcast. There's a lot of great EdTech material that we have out there that we've already put onto the podcast, and I hope you guys will follow up and listen to some of those past podcasts on the EdTech world. All right, so that's it for this week. I want to thank you guys, as always, for your continued support, and I hope that you remember to be crazy.
Thanks for listening to The James Rice Show. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and send us your questions or comments at www.thejamesriceshow.com.